So I'm a Sydney-based writer. So far, I've had a number of things published in anthologies, literary magazines. They're more short stories and poems, but I'm mainly a novelist, or I want to be a novelist. So I'm working on a novel. I guess I got into writing. It's probably going to sound cliche, but I've been writing for literally as long as I can remember, as long as I could hold a pen. As a kid, I would like steal I have a lot of older siblings. I would steal their like their school exercise books and use the lines to like write my silly little stories. And then in what we call it primary school, I think for you, I think it's elementary school. I don't know. When
Elementary
I was
school.
elementary school, I was like 11, 12. I would write all of these movie scripts, and my friends would come over in the holidays and would make these like productions that we thought were amazing. But anyway. And then when I got into high school, which is like year 7, I don't know,
Yeah.
13,
We do
14.
we have elementary school, middle school and then high school. So high school is like 14 to 18.
So yeah, so maybe around middle school.
Yeah.
Yep. So like, yeah,
Yeah.
that's when I was like, you know what, I'm going to write novels, and I wrote my first novel series in high school, and it wasn't very good, but I wrote. I'm proud of that. I committed to it, and but I was always like, when I'm older, I'm going to be a writer. When I'm older, I'm going to be a writer. And then I left school. Um, did uni, that sort of thing, and now I'm working full time, and I kind of had that realization. I'm like, oh, I'm older now. This is when I take now I take
Yeah.
this very seriously, and I'm going to make this happen.
Yeah. For sure. It's so funny when you get older and then you realize, like, I mean, you end up with all the pressures of life, but then you also realize, like, if I want to do this thing, I can just go do it now.
Yeah, this is it. This is the time. This is older.
Yeah. That's fun.
Yeah.
So you wrote a series when you were younger. So do you still have that? Do you like, you know, anything? Are you going to do anything with it ever?
No, I still have it. I keep it very it's very precious to me, of course.
Hmm.
And I read it when I'm feeling cocky.
Sure.
Just to remind myself, to humble myself a little, a
Yeah.
little bit. Yeah, I have a lot of love and a lot of affection for it, but it's it. I'm very. It was helpful to me, like learning the discipline and the commitment to writing, and also
Sure.
figuring out my writing style. But I definitely wouldn't let anyone read it ever.
Yeah. Yeah. I have my first manuscript I ever finished is back on my bookshelf. And same thing. Like, I let my brother read it and he just was like, this is bad. I was like, I know it is. The idea is solid, but everything else is no good.
Yeah. But I think you need to have your first writing experience. It's part of it. It's how you learn
Yeah.
and develop as a writer, I think.
For sure.
Yeah.
Definitely. So that's all awesome. So what do you as far as let's talk a little bit about I haven't really talked to anyone yet about that whole publishing, poems and short stories and anthologies and things. How'd you kind of get into that and how do you maybe for the writer listening, how do you find stuff like that to submit things to?
Well, it's super interesting because so I started by submitting all these short so I have all of these short stories and poems. I just write them because I don't know, I'll have a inspiration. This isn't big enough to be a novel, but I'll write it out anyway. I also find writing shorter things is a good way for me to keep momentum, especially because
Mhm.
life is super busy, and sometimes I don't have the brain space to lock into my work in progress, my novel, but I still want to keep that momentum and that practice going. So I have all of these stories, and I mean poems. I write when I have big feelings, um, but
Perfect.
yeah. So I have them. So I was like, I'll start submitting, on Submittable. That's where I started finding things, and now I'll branch into how I find things now. But I started looking for things on Submittable, and then lots and lots of rejections at the beginning, like just constant stream of rejections. And then I saw a call for a piece on inspiration, and I was like, I'm going to try write something specifically for the theme. Like before I would just send stuff that I had, and I'm like, I'm going to write something for this. But the thing is, I wasn't feeling very inspired in that moment. So I just started writing about what I was doing in that moment, which was looking for inspiration. And then it turned into this whole piece about being a writer who's writing no one reads. So
Mm.
being an unpublished writer, and how it's, the whole thing is like Emma was a writer, and that is what she did, because she like she thought writer thoughts, she spoke writer speech. She was a writer
Um,
right to her core. And then I wrote that, sent it, forgot about it, because it was just I was just in a frenzy of writing and submitting. Um, and then I remember I had this whole, like a few weeks later, was having this whole existential crisis, and I was like, I'm going to start using a pseudonym. I'm not going to publish under my real name because that's embarrassing. And
mm,
I made this whole pseudonym and all this, and I was like, okay, this is what is that the word? Pen name, anyway.
yeah,
Pen name, and
yeah,
yeah, and I'm gonna start publishing under this name. And then that day, I got accepted. This piece, a writer got accepted, and it had my name all through it because it was Emma was a writer, blah, blah, blah. And it was just kind of beautifully poetic that my first piece published was about being an unpublished writer, and
uh,
my name all the way through it. So I was like, okay, it looks like I am publishing as me. So that was my first published work, and so I still look unsubmittable. But now I think as I grow on, like as I'm more active on Instagram, because I since then have been trying to build that platform, because that's how I think now that's how you kind of make a name for yourself, and that's part of the industry now.
yeah,
Um, yeah, I've now you see a lot of opportunities through that, a lot of submission calls. So I just try to jump on as many submission calls as I can, and obviously there are still lots of rejections, but I find as the momentum goes, I start figuring out what works and just getting to know different magazines and publishing companies as well, and like getting to know what they're looking for. Help.
yeah.